Welcome to the second edition of the Sports Gazette Coronavirus Podcast. The lockdown pod. We're back. Well, I'm back, and I'm delighted to be joined by a group of our writers again from all around England this week, but with various allegiances elsewhere. So I'd like to introduce first Inam Yaphi, our Cape Townian, born and bred, who's currently living in London, but with his family in South Africa. Pranav Shahaney from Pune, India, moved to England in September. And Tom Clark, who was a teacher in Korea for the past 10 years and obviously moved back here to come to St Mary's this year. I'm delighted to have you guys all here today. First of all, how are you all doing?
We're good, Alex. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, good, thank you.
Thank you for having us.
We'll get straight into some of the issues in those aforementioned countries a bit later, and then we'll go on to talk about some of the big sports news stories from the past week. And we're lucky to be joined by James Pike, voice of Podium eSports, a bit later to talk about what is a very exciting time for that industry. But just quickly to start off with, I think we'll start with, I wanted to know what you guys have found as your guilty pleasure during the lockdown period. So I'm going to ask each of you, what is the one thing you've sort of done or found out about yourselves in the last 2 weeks that you like to do when you're locked in your home and you can't really go anywhere else? So I'm going to come to Tom first.
It's not so much finding out because I always knew, but it's Football Manager. I went cold turkey, hadn't played it for about a year, and then they offered the free one last week. And like an idiot, I downloaded it, and at 4 a.m. the other morning, just couldn't put it down. Had to get that signing over the line. Bastards.
You're hooked.
Absolutely, yeah. Hook, line, and sinker.
Where are you managing at the moment?
At the minute it's Tottenham, and then I'll start a game when I get bored with them and go down to Southend.
Pranav, jump across to you.
Oh yeah, actually I've started watching The Office again. I watched it like a few years ago, but I felt like there's some comedy show that I want to start again. So it's The Office. So right now I'm on season 4.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty hooked on. And just like Tom, I'm watching it at 4:13 in the morning. I'm getting up at 1 in the afternoon. So it's a pretty relaxed schedule.
You're almost back on Indian time.
Back on Indian time, yeah.
British or American Office?
The American Office. I never liked the British one.
Oh, sacrilege.
I'll jump to you, Inam.
For me, it's just been series as well and playing quite a bit of FIFA. But I've started. I finished last night. Tiger King,
Yeah.
Unbelievable documentary. It's mad. It's crazy. And my guilty pleasure after Tiger King is just sneaking in a bit of an episode of The Thick of It.
Oh yeah, brilliant.
That's a great show. That's a great show.
Oh man, I've got hooked. I have to finish Ozark, but I'm just like, I'll watch one episode. It's 30 minutes. Who cares? But yeah, it's just been series and FIFA basically.
I must admit, one thing I've had, obviously, there's been plenty of programs I've been watching. I've loved The Test on Amazon Prime, absolutely superb. But one thing I've been doing is making little golf holes in my house with a mug and putting into the holes. Good little thing. Might run a virtual US Masters maybe going, because obviously that would have been taking place this weekend. I know. But anyway, what we'll do is we'll jump in. We want to find out what's going on in the countries which are obviously very close to your hearts. I think it's important to enlighten everyone about it. So I'm going to start with you, Pranav, because some of the pictures we've seen coming out of India in the past week on the news over here, and I'm sure some of the listeners will have seen, are just quite incredible. And I think of all countries where we're starting to see it spread, India is probably one of the most threatened countries. I've seen people having to walk hundreds of miles from the city back to their villages, people stranded. I just sort of wanted to get an update from you of what you've heard from back home. And firstly, I hope your family are all doing well, and what you think of the situation.
Oh yeah, so my family is doing really well. They are staying indoors as much as possible, just going out for the essentials. But 10 days ago, the Prime Minister announced a nationwide lockdown, and it was received well by the people because everyone started to follow it and everyone decided to stay indoors. But a certain sect of people recently have decided to just abolish it, and they've decided, even if we get it, it's fine, we'll fight it out. They have that herd immunity like Boris Johnson wanted here. So I think that's why the cases over the past few days have gone up. But if you compare it to Europe, if you compare it to the States, I think India has controlled it really well. Although the testing numbers aren't as much as they are happening worldwide. So we don't for sure know what the exact number is. But as of now, I think things are under control. obviously, yes, the people going back to their villages, they might spread it over there, and they don't have the testing kits there, so there's no way to decide or ascertain what the exact number there is. But I think as of now, they've controlled it really well. So I'm just hoping and fingers crossed that after the lockdown ends, that things get better and people can start going to work soon.
And what's been the sort of political response over there in terms of, obviously the country is in quite an interesting situation at the moment before the coronavirus, and how are people thinking they've responded to it?
So the political situation is that it's a right-wing government, and they've done a lot of questionable things in the past. But for a change, most of the people have backed their decision. Although the opposition initially said that it's not the right thing to do, but eventually even they've also come to the conclusion that it's spreading worldwide, and the best thing to do is stay indoors. Obviously, they are worried about the migrants and the people going back to their villages. So that's a concern that they have to deal with. But I think that for a change, everything's united in India, apart from a few people who are just deciding to go against the curve.
Perfect, brilliant. And obviously, you like you said, you have dealt with it pretty well. Only 58 deaths so far, I think, as of recording of this podcast. So that is promising. And I think one country you may well have learned from, just jumping across to Tom, is obviously Korea, because the response we saw there was just absolutely incredible. I can remember talking to you in February time, Tom, and obviously that was when Asia was very much the epicenter of this pandemic, and you were quite worried, obviously, with your wife being back in Korea and obviously a number of your friends. But if you look at the numbers, I mean, only just under 10,000 reported cases and only about 162 deaths, I think, as of the recording of this podcast. And if you compare that to us, where we're sort of a month behind, and we're obviously now over 2,000 deaths and thousands of cases, obviously we don't know because of testing. Why do you think this has happened and Korea have been so successful?
Well, Korea has had nothing on this scale, but has had pandemics before. There was obviously MERS and SARS were in Asia. So they do have a system set up in case, but it was just rolled out very, very quickly. And I was talking to my wife last week about how quick things were done there. And Korean have this phrase, it's called bali bali, and it just means quickly. And it's for everything in life. If you want to get on or off the tube, it's as many people pushing on as people getting off. It's just, you've got to do everything quickly. And in some parts of life, it's incredibly frustrating, but here it's been brilliant. It means that, when the pandemic first happened in Korea, the government responded quickly, and they've dealt with it very well, but they have made mistakes as well. But there weren't enough hospital beds straight away, but they were very quickly made available. The speed of testing rolled out was unbelievably quick, and now you can go for a drive-through test. You go into a walk-in center where it's these tents that are set up outside the hospital, so you don't have to go in, you don't have to wait. And you get the results sent by text message to you if it's negative within a few hours, or a phone call if it's positive telling you what to do next. But the government also have a system where they can send an emergency alert, and it's basically a text message other than your phone is buzzing and going crazy. And it tells you if there's somebody in your neighborhood who's got it. It tells you what you need to do. It tells you where that person has been. There are some privacy issues. People have been found to have gone to places that they shouldn't have been, say, let's put it that way. Couples have split up, or will once they're allowed out of isolation. But it's just been a really quick response, and people listen to the government. We would get told here to stay home, to avoid non-essential travel and work, and that weekend that it happened, everybody was out the window here. I've got the beach, and I could just see tons of people out. And in Korea that just hasn't happened. If they're told to do something, they've done it. And because of that, they haven't had the isolation that we've had to do. They haven't had to do any lockdowns like Spain and Italy, because people follow the measures that have been put in place. And it just kind of makes it a bit embarrassing how badly we have dealt with it, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I that's quite apparent, and that's one of the reasons I wanted to get you on here, just to talk about that. And just what is the situation today in Korea? So are people allowed to go out, I presume, and business wise, what's the situation in terms of the economy?
Well, so schools, universities are all closed, and basically this semester will just be done online. Offices are open. So my wife hasn't worked from home at all. She's gone to work every day throughout all of this. But it's just her office decided to work from 10 o'clock so that people were traveling in later, avoiding rush hours, and they just worked a little bit later to make up for it. And it's not normality at all, but it is slightly getting back to it. So the football team that I played for when I was there, they carried on playing for the first few weekends but then that stopped when they realized that maybe they shouldn't be. But then I was seeing pictures from friends this weekend who they went out and did more exercise than they would have done before, but they went and drove out of the city into the countryside and went hiking. Another friend went again into the countryside and went to some stables and went horse riding, things that can be done in relative isolation. And it's not go out once a day type of thing. It's go out when necessary, or being sensible. You don't go to the cinema, don't go to a shopping mall, but you do other things.
Yeah. Well, it does just very, very apparent to us that testing early and testing efficiently was sort of the key to this. And it's obviously pleasing to hear that it's not seemed to haven't had that second wave as of and hopefully that's a positive that we can take here in Europe, but potentially right across the continent here, the slowness of the authorities and the government to react may well have cost thousands of lives here. Because I think
to try and stop the second wave, what happens is if you fly into Korea, before you're allowed through immigration into the country, you have to download an app. And this app basically, it will always have your location, and it will know if you've turned your phone off or if, or whatever. And so that contacts the authorities to then contact you, because once you get to Korea, no matter where you come from, you go into a 14-day quarantine, isolation at home. And if you refuse to do that, you go into a government mandatory place. And if you refuse to do that, then you aren't allowed in the country.
Yeah. I just want to come across to you two guys, actually, Pranav and Inam. What do you think about just hearing Tom speak about what's happened there, and what are your views? Do you think we should have done more here?
I feel like when we knew what was going on here in England, it kind of took Boris Johnson and the government too long to kind of just say, like, listen, stop going to football games, stop public gatherings. I feel like when he was when the one press conference, he was saying, I'm still shaking hands with people, some who have coronavirus, and I'll continue to do so. I think that very misled the public into kind of understanding how serious the situation is. And I feel like what he should have done was just nip it in the bud and say, listen, this is a very serious problem. No more football, no more public gatherings, and let's go into isolation. I think the numbers will be significantly lower than they are right now. But it's gone now. People that just have to stay home, take care of themselves, and this too shall pass.
Exactly. I mean, a lot of countries have learned from what's happened in China, what's happened in the States. And I think the UK has still not learned, because I see that there are around 10 flights coming in every day from New York, and that's crazy. I mean, India shut their international borders 2 weeks ago, and I'm sure a lot of countries around the world are doing that. Or if they are letting people in, they are at least testing them. And what I'm reading is that's not happening at Heathrow. So I mean, it's
what
crazy.
Do you guys think
people
about
coming in from New York? They need to be tested, and ideally they shouldn't be allowed to come in. I mean, they should just ban international travel.
What do you guys think of stranded, say now, people from that, say now, stranded South Africans coming back into South Africa from vacations in Switzerland or Italy? What are you guys' thoughts on that? Should they just be brought back and just self-isolate, or do you think that's an incredible risk as well?
Well, no, I mean, I think this is where you'd see what Korea have done and learn from them. When people come back in, because you can't stop someone of that nationality going back to their home country, but once they get there, you can either as Korea have done, they're leaving it up to people via this app as well to log in and to log any health issues and to stay at home. Or if you don't trust your public to do that, then you provide them with government mandated facilities that they go to, like we did actually originally. I think it was in February when we flew back, this is UK, flew back people from Wuhan, and then they stayed in, I think it was up in the Wirral, they stayed in accommodation up there with testing. And it depends which way you do it, whether you put them in facilities or whether you trust them. But yeah, you do let them come back.
And I wanted to obviously get an idea of what you're hearing from home, Inam. I know speaking to you the other day, it seems like there is a big worry, and I know you're worried, obviously. And I think all along the World Health Organization have been worried about Africa becoming any kind of epicenter to it. And if that's the case, we're going to see thousands die. What do you think? What do you think's going on back home?
I mean, it's really, really serious, because what happens is there wasn't that many cases in Africa to begin with, and it's been reported that it's brought in by people who traveled in Italy or Switzerland, and they've unfortunately brought it back because they had no symptoms and they just lived their life, and then they've realized that they have the virus, and that's spread on to whoever works for them, or is they cleaner or helper. And when they go home to their townships, they living in confined areas as well. So that's it's a very big issue, especially in South Africa, because the health system isn't that great. I mean, 20% of the population are unemployed, and people live in shacks. And I was watching on Sky Sports. They did a segment on South Africa, and they brought in the army, and they're carrying these AK-47s, and they're telling people to stay indoors. And one guy says, "How is it possible you're telling me to socially distance, but I'm going to go into my one-room shack where I've living with 5 other people?" So that's the thing. I think the upper class they've kind of said it's easier for them to social distance and self-isolate because they have all the resources and they have bigger houses. But I think in the township and the poor areas is where it's going to spread, because people just can't do it, and some are trying, but it's just not working. And I think instilling fear instead of teaching people what they should be doing, I think that's the way. But it might turn ugly, 100%.
Yeah, and having been to a township myself and had a look around, it does really strike you with worry if that is the case. And I just wondered if the government have got their thinking right. Obviously, you have this issue where it's extreme rich and extreme poor in South Africa, particularly throughout the major cities, which is going to be really interesting to see how they deal with it.
Yeah, I mean, the government put a 12 last week. On Thursday, they put a 21-day lockdown, and how they've gone about it is just strict precautions. No walking the dog, alcohol and cigarettes prohibited, and it's just like, again, it's just like, it's very tough on people to even. I mean, you should be able to walk your dog, and I think it's tough for them because this is a situation that's been going on for longer than people have been poor. People are always going to be poor. So that is a situation where it's very hard to fix, and it's going to be even harder to fix right now during this pandemic. So they've just got to do the best they could.
And I suppose
they can, rather.
And I suppose, Pranav, a similar situation in India. Do you think in some of the poorer villages and the poorer towns, you could see it spread?
I mean, yeah, I do. They've done a good job to control it in the cities, and they have testing facilities. But in the villages where there are poor people, they don't even. I mean, I'm sure a lot of them don't even know about it being such a big issue, because there's not enough communication, not enough media over there. So I mean, I really fear for those people. And even there are a few cases coming up now that in big cities, in the poorer parts of the cities, there are people who are containing it, and the entire area is then being put under quarantine. So I mean, it is a big worry, but I mean, there's nothing else we can do than just hope that things get better soon.
Well, another thing is, how it's a stupid rumor that Black people can't get it. I mean, it's about time where people just. I think that's in South Africa as well, because Africa was one of the last continents to get it. Everyone thinks we're immune to it, but it's not true, and people gonna lose their lives because of that.
And I think that is the important message. Thank you, all of you, because as I said last week to the girls on the show, it's really important just that if you are in any of these countries where there are legislations in place, stay inside, stay at home, and we will get through this. And you can see if you listen to the government and if the government takes swift action, and maybe there should be more pressure on governments and more people challenging what's being done over here. We've seen and heard from Tom what can happen if you do act swiftly and if you do obey what you're being told to. So I think we'll put that out again. Right, we will. I'm conscious to get on to some of the big sports talking points of the last week. I wanted to start obviously with Wimbledon. I think that's the biggest story of the week from our perspective. It hasn't been cancelled since World War II, and there was the sense of inevitability with this. I'm going to start with you, Pranav. What was your reaction to how the All England club dealt with it?
I mean, I'm surprised that they took so long to make an announcement. I think it should have been done earlier. Every tennis event before that was being cancelled, and there are talks about the US Open also being cancelled. So I think that the All England club should have done it at least 2 or 3 weeks before they actually did. That's the problem. I mean, it's not just with them, it's with the entire country, and people are not taking it seriously. The other day I went out and I'm seeing restaurants open and people still going there. So, I mean, people need to just wake up and maybe take this seriously.
And what do we think is going to happen with obviously the French Open? They obviously have set themselves up with the new date. Do we think they're going to have to backtrack now? Wimbledon have made this decision. Do you think that's going to put a lot of pressure on them and the organisers there?
I think it will. I mean, it has to. They have to first get this virus under control, and then they can start planning sporting events. And there are talks about things happening behind closed doors, but I don't see that happening, at least not for tennis. Maybe for other sporting events that can happen, but I don't see that happening for tennis.
I'll jump to you, Tom.
I slightly disagree with Pranav. I don't think there was any need to rush a decision. I don't think it would have made any difference if Wimbledon had announced last week or 2 weeks ago that it was to be cancelled. Yes, there was an inevitability about it, but with something like the French Open, I mean, you can talk about it with football as well. I don't see the need to rush into making decisions because this is so fluid and we don't know where we're going to be in a month's time, 2 months' time, 3 months' time. It could well be that the French Open can't take place in September, but it could also be that things have changed, things have moved on, and maybe there's a possibility of somehow arranging it. I wouldn't have thought there will be, but I don't think they need to make any decisions right now. I don't see what difference it would make if they say, okay, Roland Garros can't host the French Open this year, if they say that now or if they wait a month. I don't see why we need to rush a decision.
That's good.
Don't you think it hangs? I mean, the doubt for the athlete as well. Like I think if an athlete knows, okay, I'm not participating in Wimbledon in June or July, whatever, I can't mentally prepare myself for that. But if you hang it over someone's head, they kind of like the anticipation is going to happen, it's not going to happen. Don't you think that could have a negative impact on athletes as well?
Possibly, yeah. And probably actually the people who need the decision more than most are the lower ranked players who might only get through to the first and second round because that is their money for the year, just for qualifying for Wimbledon, not the Roger Federer and Novak Djokovic, Rafa Nadal type of player. Mm. But I think everyone's going through stressful situations, and if a tennis player has to wait a month, I don't think that's the end of the world for them. I think they would rather wait and have the tournament on if there's any possibility than being told now, okay, the French Open can't be played in September, and then come August they find out that actually it could be played. But you know, without actually speaking to one of the athletes, then I can't properly answer your question. But I would say it's probably the lower ranked players who might have more stress over this than the mega rich players.
Yeah, it's a good point. And you mentioned football. I know this morning the Belgian League have announced, the Belgian FA have announced that Club Brugge have been awarded the league. They're not going to resume it. And you mentioned the hastiness to make the decision. Obviously, they don't have the pressure of and the reliance on this global brand that the Premier League, that Serie A, that La Liga, and that the Bundesliga have.
There was also only one game left in the Belgian league.
Yeah,
They go to a playoff system, and they've just decided to scrap that. So I think the actual champions, there was only one game left, and the only issue was between one team qualifying for the Champions League and one team going to the Europa League. So there's this very, very different situation.
Yeah, obviously completely different to us. And I'll jump to you, Pranav. How long do you think until we get the next decision, the next development from the FA on the Premier League?
I mean, as of now, I don't think until April they're going to make a further announcement until the month ends and see how things go. But I mean, if the curve flattens and if people are starting to go out, I think what they should do is in May, if things get better in May or maybe start of June, they should start with the games but played behind closed doors, and also issue a ban on public gatherings anywhere around the stadiums or in pubs. So people should just stay at home and watch the games if they manage to start the league. But I think the best way to go about it is make a call, say in May, and I mean start off playing it behind closed doors and then see how things go after that.
Honestly, they don't have to rush it, man.
Yeah.
There's more serious things than football. So if the curve flattens and everyone's doing better, they should finish. But I think they have to finish the league. There's too much things at stake. They can't just suspend it because that means league doesn't come up. I know Pranav won't be happy about that. And will Liverpool win the league? It's a lot at stake here, man. And even I know it's 25 points, but still they're not mathematically. It's not mathematically possible for them to have won the league yet. So they just got to figure some way to carry on the league. If it's in summer, I think that's going to be very good for the self-esteem of the public as well, because it's going to be summer, sun's out, a lot of football to be played. I think it could be really, very good as well.
Right. And on the topic of football, obviously the Premier League have come under a lot of pressure this week, particularly your club, obviously Tottenham, Tom, with the announcement about wages and salaries and furloughing some of the lesser staff members. What do you think is going to be the outcome of all this? Obviously, they're meeting today, I believe. Seems like common sense will take a hold here, and the players will take cuts.
Yeah, you would assume that the players will take cuts. I think there are issues with the PFA that can't have the players cutting their wages hasn't been announced yet. I think what they've done with the zero contract hour workers and the matchday staff is abysmal. I don't think that should be placed at the fault of the players. There's a multi-billionaire owner who could quite easily dip into the club's coffers and pay those people. But yes, the players should be taking a pay cut, but also they're young men. There's a few of them are in their 30s, a lot of them are in their early 20s, and it's hard to put all of society's ills at their door and have them solve every issue. It should be something that comes from the top down.
Tom, do you think? I know this might be a bit off, but do you think this Daniel Levy getting rid of, or with the scouting team, do you think he could use this in the summer, end of the season, to say, I can't sign any players because we haven't had that much to look at them. We haven't had a scouting staff for the last couple of months. Do you think that will be something he'll use in his locker later down the line or no?
No, I wouldn't have thought so. I think his bonuses are quite heavily weighted towards what competition Spurs get into, and I think he knows that if he wants Tottenham to be challenging for the Champions League places, then they do need investment, and I think he would. How much they'll spend, who knows? Who knows when the transfer window is going to be? But I would think that he would still have to dip into the transfer kitty. Yeah.
And I just want to jump to you, Pranav. Obviously, I know you've written a story up about the pressures on the non-league football. Do we think this is going to translate to the football league clubs the more weeks this goes on, and how much pressure do you think the EFL, the FA, and obviously the Premier League to get together as a group are going to come under to do something for those smaller clubs?
I mean, I think the smaller clubs, a lot of them have signed up to a petition saying that they've not accepted the FA's decision. I think hashtag United Spencer Owen has led the charge. Every day he's been posting updates about it. So I still think that the FA will be forced into making a decision about the lower league clubs, but I don't see that happening in the EFL or in the Premier League, because it's a completely different thing. The finances involved are huge. The power the clubs hold compared to the power the clubs hold in non-league football is completely different. So I think that the FA might be able to bully the non-league clubs into that decision, but I don't see that happening with the bigger clubs. And for my opinion, I think it's a wrong decision to do that. What they should be doing is either go on a points per game system or end the league where it is. But making it null and void is just worthless, because a lot of teams might just shut up shop because of that. But it's a really sad decision, and I hope everything's okay with them now.
I think this is a lesson for clubs. I'm not just talking about local league clubs. I'm talking about the big dogs as well, that they have to stop spending their money wisely, man. I mean, and with Barcelona, for example, I know it's a crazy example, but they've basically put enough pressure in the media to make the players buckle, and they've given them a 70% wage cut. And it's going to save a lot of money. Like with the 4 captains, it's going to save them something around 8.4 million euros. From Griezmann, it's going to save them 2.1, and then from Suarez, it's 1.5 million euros. So it's a lot of money, but I feel like they've used it to kind of help them to put pressure on the players. Like Messi was coming out with statements. So I think some clubs have kind of forced their hand a bit, and it's quite embarrassing for them to put all that pressure on players.
Perfect. Obviously, we've been hearing a lot about cancellations, postponement, a lot of discussion about that. But one sport that is absolutely flying at the moment is eSports as a whole. And one man who knows a lot about that, and I said we'd hear from him at the start, is iRacing's James Pike, who is the broadcasting voice behind Podium eSports. He's also been working as a producer on some of the NASCAR broadcasts going out on Fox Sports. And I was lucky enough to speak to him. So here's James. First of all, wanted you to sort of just give me an impression of what the last few weeks have been like for you personally, and then sort of for the industry, obviously, but from a personal perspective to start with.
Right. I would say last week was maybe one of the absolute most mental weeks I've ever had in my life, point blank, just because all of the attention that we got as real world motorsport just completely shut down. Everybody turned their eyes to us. And eventually NASCAR, which I think everybody around the world knows is pretty big here in America, eventually did get their act together and signed a TV deal with one of the aerial networks here in the United States, Fox, and got a series going, which was great in and of itself. And I know I'm going to talk about a bit, but the week before, and I think we have to go back to the 14th or 13th, I want to say. So yeah, it was the 13th where NASCAR announced that the race that weekend and then the race the following weekends were going to be suspended. This is before they pushed everything out. Now I think the suspension's up to the first week of May. And so within that time span, there wasn't enough time for them to put together something official. So one of the companies that I work with and co-own actually has good relationships with a lot of people in the garage. And so 2 of the crew members for 2 of the more prominent teams in the series got together, and they sort of rounded up their friends and their mates, and they were like, you guys want to run something on Sunday and just run a race? Because that's what we do on Sunday afternoons. We race, right? So they got together a group of about 35 people and put together a grid, and then they called me and said, hey, we've got this race. It's going to feature some big names. Dale Earnhardt Jr. is going to be in it, amongst others. Do you want to go ahead and run it and broadcast it? And I said, Junior's running, and all these other people too that are really famous? Because it was drivers, it was crew chiefs, it was spotters, it was public relations personnel, it was country music artists. It was a diverse list, but a very entertaining list and notable list all the same. And I said, absolutely. So our company had the first sort of unofficial race that NASCAR ended up modeling their whole setup off of. And that went on air in the afternoon last Sunday here in the United States, and I guess around the world too, because it was broadcast on Twitch. And we set an all-time record we had 20K concurrent live viewers pretty much throughout the entire race, which was a record for any sort of stream with our program that we use, iRacing. So, given that, yeah, as I say, given that we had averaged about maybe 30 or 40 a broadcast before, and then all of a sudden shot up to 20,000, the attention that we got overnight was unbelievable. I spent the entire weekend either in production meetings or planning, and my phone just would not stop going off. And it just sort of snowballed throughout the whole week. And it was pretty much every night we were doing something just to get our name out there. So it was wild. It was crazy. It was busy, but certainly rewarding because everybody knows what we're capable of, and everybody knows what we can do as far as broadcasting goes. We can make it look like TV for the most part. We had articles in ESPN, The Verge. I think Kotaku might have done one about us. So we almost became superstars overnight, but it was all because we had taken time and studied the great broadcasters of motorsport here in America and tried to just follow their lead as best we could. And I think in watching our broadcast, people recognized that and said that they wanted more. And that's sort of how we got the proper setup that NASCAR has with the Pro Invitational Series. That is sort of their game plan until everything passes over. You pump all the feeds from the iRacing production studio in Massachusetts down to Charlotte, where Fox's studio is, and you just put it on a screen for the real life TV announcers to call and mix it all together, and you have a virtual race that looks an awful lot like the real thing. Yeah, and that was the one that got 900,000, and that was only on cable television here in the United States. And this upcoming weekend, we're going to be on aerial television as well. So I figure we're going to cross over 1 million. It's an incredible opportunity for everybody involved. And
what sort of impact do you think this is going to have on the industry after all this is over? Do you think it can maintain this, or well, maybe not maintain this level, obviously, but do you think we're going to see more people? Do you think we're going to see it on cable television regularly?
I think it has to. I think especially, and I imagine it probably applies for a lot of other esports in the world, but I think for motorsport in particular, so much of what we do and so much of this translates really well to real life. If you're good within iRacing in particular, which is the program that we use, you will more likely than not be pretty solid in real life as a driver. So, that's sort of the draw for a lot of the real life people, is that it's very true to life, and it gives you an opportunity, since the setup isn't as intense, to create more on-demand content, especially midweek when it would be difficult to, get a truck loaded up and, set everything up at a paddock and, make sure that you've got everything lined up for a 7 p.m. start on a Tuesday night. Here, you literally press a button, make a few clicks, and bam, you're in a race. So I think long-term, I think the growth area will be in the middle of the week in terms of content, although you can certainly see it at the weekend as well. But I think for us, since everybody's usually at a track somewhere on the weekend or at a circuit, I think midweek broadcasts in particular are going to see a bump. And I think that the floor is going to be higher than it was before. I made the point to our team 2 Sundays ago that this was sort of our 1979 Daytona 500 moment. 79 500 is well known across NASCAR circles because it was the first race to be televised in its entirety from flag to flag. They used to show sort of highlight clips up until that point. And it just so happened that there was a tremendously huge snowstorm across the eastern United States that weekend that year. So everybody was stuck in their homes, and on aerial television here, you've got 3 or 4 channels at that time, and everybody else was just showing tapes. So CBS had the race live, and it was the only live thing on TV. It just so happened that race was one of the best NASCAR's ever had. There was a fight after the checkered flag as the leaders wrecked going into the last turn on the last lap and got into each other racing for the win. It was incredible television. And that race, a lot of people attribute as the sort of genesis for NASCAR's growth from a primarily southeastern sport in the United States to the national phenomenon that it is today. I think that this whole stretch, so long as we're all cooped up in our homes like this, I think that's exactly what this is for esports. It's that moment in which everybody has to watch you because there's nothing else to see, and then they realize that your product is actually entertaining, and the benefits stick around long after the need for the content is gone, and you have real life racing or real life esports available. And I think the same thing applies, with NBA and FIFA and all the other stuff as well. And anything that sort of mimics a true to life sport. And maybe to some degree, those that don't, the Rocket Leagues, the League of Legends, the Call of Duties that all have big supports, they're all getting the attention now because they are it as far as live and on-demand content goes at this time. So, and they're all pretty entertaining too. It's a brave new world that we're all entering, and we'll just have to see how it develops over the next 10, 15 years.
Perfect. And it was great to hear from James. And I can confirm that NASCAR actually broke their own record this past weekend. After I spoke to James, they went over 1 million views on Fox Sports, which is a new record for any esport. And I just wanted to come to you, Tom, because obviously in Korea this is massive. They not necessarily iRacing, but stuff like League of Legends and stuff like that. They play them in stadiums and stuff like that. Do you think that we could see that translate to America, to Britain, and see people performing in stadiums? I know they had Fortnite at Flushing Meadows last year. Do you think we could see more of that?
So I am not a fan of esports. I've not ever really watched them, but you flick through the TV channels in Korea, and there are a few channels which just 24/7 show esports, and it's mainly League of Legends is the most popular one, and there is an indoor arena which seats thousands, and then they've also used the Seoul World Cup Stadium, which hosted loads of games in 2002 and the semi-final in 2002 World Cup. It's a 60,000 seater stadium, and it sells out to watch people play esports. So it's certainly in East Asia is huge and only going to get bigger through all of this. But it's also a generational thing as well. I have a 13-year-old nephew who regularly, even before any of this, would sit there watching FIFA games on YouTube and stuff, things that I would never have done
that as well.
So I think it is going to just get bigger and bigger just with younger people, but probably through this pandemic is going to explode.
Perfect, thank you. Right, well, moving on from the sports discussion, and just to finish with, again, like we said, we like to finish with something a bit lighter. Obviously, people have been watching all sorts on Netflix, as we found out from our little guilty pleasures section at the start. But why not? What not better way to give our listeners some movies to go out and watch? So I want you guys to each give me your 3 top must-watch sports movies. They can be documentary movies or actual movies, either way. So I'm going to start with you, Tom.
All right, well, it's hard, but down to 3 would be Senna and Maradona, both by Asif Kapadia, whose documentaries, because he did Amy as well, but that's not a sports movie, obviously, but they are just amazing, and they give you a real insight into things that you didn't know about the person. The Maradona one, so I watched it with my mum, who her thoughts on Maradona were 86, cheat, 94, drugs, cheat. You knew nothing about before, after, or in between. And when you watch it and then talk about it afterwards, you realise that there's so much more about Maradona than you ever realise. Yes, an amazing footballer, a very flawed individual as well, but the pressures that were on him, and you kind of think anybody in his situation might have gone, the route his life went. It's just amazing, absolutely amazing. And the same with Senna. I'm not a Formula One fan, but it's just incredible, and the cinematography of it is amazing. And third one is, with honorable mentions to Rocky, the best sports movie of all time, the best boxing movie is Raging Bull. It's just an absolute classic, and if you haven't, you must see it.
Yeah, the Raging Bull
I
was
think in Maradona, one of the best parts to kind of sum everything up was when his trainer was like, there's Diego and there's Maradona. And I'd run a mile for Diego, but I wouldn't put one foot in front for Maradona. I thought that was phenomenal, how he's so like different types of persons to different people. It's amazing.
And just the access footage, the family footage that he got is just incredible. And there's some really good interviews with the director about how he got the access and what it was like, how difficult it was to actually speak to Maradona himself as well. Brilliant, really, and the writing around it is amazing as well.
Definitely worth watching. I've seen Senna. It's superb. Again, say the same lines, and it's just such a shame that we were deprived of what could have been just an even bigger and better career than what we had, and a life of an absolute gent, in my opinion. Anyway, we'll move on to Inam. What are your top three?
So first I got Invictus. I think at the time it's a very I don't know, feel good, I really say, for me personally as South African when we won the World Cup, and I think with the relationship between Pina and Mandela, I think it's phenomenal.
Yeah.
I've got Rocky 2 as well, because it's the Sylvester Stallion. Rocky, it's a brand. I think he's a god. I know I shouldn't say that, but he is, him and Arnold. And while we're talking now, I've just thought of how have I forgotten goal with Santiago Nunez. I mean, the story from, I'm thinking about it now. I should find the movie and watch it again. That is one of the best sporting movies of all time, 100%.
Pranav, you're up.
Oh yeah, so I've gone for 2 English movies and 1 from my hometown in Hindi.
Lovely.
Yeah. So I'll start. My number 3 will be Rocky, the first part. I think it set the
That's
foundation.
American though. It's not English.
It said, sorry?
It's American, not English.
No, I mean English language.
Oh.
Yeah. It set the foundation really well for the entire series, and I think it just started well and made everyone fall in love with Sylvester Stallone, and he didn't even need to do anything for the next 4 parts, and the movie would sell. But he acted really well, and they told the story really well. And my number 2 will be Chak De India, which is a Hindi movie. So it's a story about a former player who missed a penalty in the final against Pakistan, and he was playing for India, so it's a huge rivalry. And he got criticized by the entire nation for years. So what he did was he made a comeback as the coach of the women's team, and he got them to the Olympic final, and they beat Australia, who were the best team at the time. So I mean, that was his story from being the scapegoat to being the hero. So they've shown his journey and how he's fought through a lot, and he's finally got India to where they belong. And the number 1 will be, I think Alex, you'll agree with this, is Moneyball.
Yeah, Moneyball is on my list.
I get tired of watching that movie. I've probably watched it 10 times, and I just find something new every time. It has its ups and downs. It takes you on an emotional roller coaster. I mean, It's just an amazing movie. And I'm not a baseball fan, but I was so intrigued and so in touch with the story from start to end.
And I think that's the key for me. That stands out on my list as well. The other 2 are from America. One's an American football film and one's a cricket one. And they're obviously sports I love. Baseball's a sport I have no real affiliation to. I do follow it a little bit, but the film is superb and Brad Pitt's amazing in it. So I'll get on to my 3. Number 3 for me was Moneyball. And number 2 was Fire in Babylon. It's about the West Indian team in their prime and that bowling attack. And I just think it's superb. More because I don't think they're talked about enough in many ways as to how good they were. So it's superb. Like I said, Moneyball was 3. And number 1 for me is Remember the Titans. Great film. Denzel Washington, set in Virginia in the 70s. 2 schools, one was black, one was white. They were forced to combine together. And the heart of this was the American football team. And you have one black coach and one white coach, and Denzel Washington brings it together. It's brilliant, true story, superb. So yeah, that rounds out for me. So plenty of hours for you guys to get tucked into there, and for the listeners as well. I think that's
if you're talking Rocky, I can't believe Rocky 4 didn't get a mention. If you're going to go Rocky, it's all about Ivan Drago getting his revenge. Amazing.
Yeah, but for me, Damned United as well. Martin Sheen is superb as Brian Clough. But yeah, there's so many out there. And any suggestions or anything you have, send them into Sports Gazette, and I'm sure we can retweet them and anything. That's just about it for today. Thank you for listening. As I said, give us a follow at Sports Gazette, capital S, capital G. I wanted to thank each and every one of you. So thank you, Inam.
No problem. Thanks, mate.
Cheers, Pranav. Thank you. Thanks. It's been great to have you. It's been great to have all your insights. Thank you, Tom. Particularly great to hear about career and a slight positive outlook on the coronavirus.
Cheers, my pleasure.
And I think the best way to end things, I'll be back next week. But stay safe, stay at home. To all three of you guys, keep your family safe. And that goes out to everyone. And yeah, thank you very much.